And speaking about anticipating, our next speaker is all about anticipating. He's been in multiple roles that are designed to help him not only be his organization be more secure, but to think about solving problems different. And that's what his talk next is all about, creating that playbook for you to get proactive.
Your attack surface is growing. Your response window shouldn't be. Mastering exposure management means more than detection. It requires smart prioritization, fast action, and AI-driven tools that cut through the noise to expose what truly matters, so you can stay ahead of real threats. Mike Milner is VP of Product Management at Trend Micro. With a background in government cybersecurity and global threat intelligence, he brings deep expertise in AI, cloud, and global security, helping organizations navigate risk and unlock opportunity through technology.
So I want to dive a little bit deeper into this concept of exposure. When you hear the word exposure, the first thing you think of is, am I exposed? And if you look at the numbers, this is from last year, 2024, 1,000% increase in breaches in the US. So when you think about that, these numbers tell the story that when you're thinking about exposure, you probably are exposed. And if you're still not sure if you're exposed, rest assured, the attackers are looking for these exposures, and they will know. Why do we care about this? 63% of organizations experienced a breach due to an unknown, unmanaged, or poorly managed internet-facing asset. So these exposure points, these vulnerabilities, these devices, this is where the attackers are finding their way into your organization. And managing them is a big problem. If you look, 75% of organizations take a day or more to find risks, and 63% take a day or more to remediate risks. And I think this is kind of being generous. So how do we wrap our heads around this? I've thrown a lot of numbers at you. I like to think of things in metaphors, analogy. Eric talked earlier about the hole in the roof, right? Fixing that leak before it destroys your house below. I like to think about chess, and I've always liked chess. I grew up in a family of 4 boys, and we'd always play chess with each other. And I loved chess, but I wasn't really that good at it. I was the youngest of 4 boys, so very often, almost always, they would beat me pretty quickly. And I'm kind of a competitive guy, so I didn't really like that. So one day, I got a book on chess from the library. And there was a lot in there, all sorts of strategies and techniques, more than my young mind could absorb. But there was one lesson, one technique that I took from this book, and it was just a simple, kind of obvious for anyone who knows chess, but for me it was groundbreaking. If you don't know where to move, just try to control the center of the board. You don't know for sure what your opponent's going to do. I didn't know what my brothers were going to do, but if I positioned myself strategically, I would be more prepared. And just taking that single lesson, that single strategy, I started winning games more and more, and pretty soon they didn't want to play with me anymore. But you can see just that simple shift in mindset. Instead of just reacting to their moves, I started anticipating and preparing in advance, of being proactive. And that's a big shift. If you're always reacting to their moves, you're never going to win. Reacting, you lose. But if you can anticipate their moves, prepare in advance, then it gives you that chance to win. Now, a chessboard is a nice, clean 8x8 grid, right? It doesn't change. It's very easy to kind of keep that in your head. But in the real world, in your organizations, you're not dealing with a nice, clean 8x8 grid, right? Your attack surface is always expanding. Cloud, shadow IT, remote workers, devices. It's huge, and it's not just one chess game. It's many chess games, hundreds, thousands. Now, a grandmaster of chess is an expert at anticipating and preparing for their opponent's moves. Our customers have experts in cybersecurity, the grandmasters of cybersecurity, but even they can't keep track of hundreds and thousands of different chess games going on at the same time. It's too much. So they need tools and techniques to get a handle on this, because there's so much happening at once, it can be impossible to manage. And if there's too much coming in, if there's too much noise, then you can't really play the game properly. You can't do it effectively. So we need to think of ways to get on top of this, ways to play all these games. And that's really where our metaphor of chess kind of falls apart. In chess, chess is civilized. There's rules. There's a move, a counter move. But in the real world, if you can't keep track of everything that's going on, the attacker doesn't need to wait for your counter move. They're going to probe and keep trying to get into your network. They're not going to wait for you. But we can turn that around. The same applies to us. We don't need to wait for the attackers. We can make our moves in advance. We can have that plan, prepare ourselves for an attack proactively, so that when an attacker does come along, we're ready. So we have a plan. Because if you don't have a plan, you can't win. So how do we make a plan? What's our plan? I'm going to talk through this idea of the proactive security playbook. 3 big steps, and we kind of have this theme, right? We're going to start with visibility. You need to see what you've got. If you can't see it, you can't protect it. Those unmanaged, poorly managed, we need to find those assets and deal with them. There's challenges there. We often think of a point in time, right? What's my security right now? Where am I right now? But we need to think of this continuously. Environments, your environments are changing so rapidly, we need to just always think of it as continuous visibility. So when your development teams are deploying new infrastructure in the cloud, they're deploying things constantly, you're constantly monitoring. Because you need to. The adversary just needs to find one weakness. You need to stay on top of this continually. And that's hard. You've got lots of tools. Over time, you've got lots of things you need to protect. Maybe you've got lots of tools to monitor them. But if you have to try to manage all these different tools, that's a big challenge. Particularly when you don't even know what you're managing, this idea of shadow IT, unmanaged assets. So we need to kind of get over this hump. It's not just seeing the assets, but actually understanding the risk they present. Now, of course, there's strategies here, things we can use. We need to adopt that continuous monitoring mindset. Always looking at our resources. As they change, we look at them again. And thinking of them like an attacker would think of them. Not what they're doing for our business, but how an attacker might use them to breach. So we're assessing all of our assets and looking at how they're configured, how they're interconnected to understand how they affect our security posture. And we need to do that across all of our assets. That tool sprawl, if we can't consolidate our tools, at least pull the data in, integrate that data into one place so that you can manage it effectively. This idea of continuous monitoring is critically important. You need to pull all this data in and actually visualize it, right? If you need visibility, you need to visualize it. And understanding all of that information can be tricky, so you need to be always doing it, always updating it. And thinking like an attacker sometimes is challenging if you're not thinking in that security mindset. So leverage the tools. AI is very good at thinking differently. So leverage AI to not just look at the assets in isolation, but see how they're connected, what's behind them, how might an attacker traverse through my systems to breach my network. Leverage AI to find all that for you and always update it as your assets change, and it will alert you on the most important things. We heard earlier the idea of continuously assessing, right? We're always looking. Well, leverage that for your whole security picture. We heard Zach and Evan talking about, Stuart talking about health data, right? This is important data for your organization. There are compliance standards to help make sure organizations are managing this effectively, because it's important, not just for the business, but for people, for the customers. So leverage that security, that continuous monitoring for your compliance as well. You need to think your attack surface is not necessarily what you want it to be. It's not what's in your configuration management database. It's what the attackers are actually seeing out there. That's what you need to manage. Okay, step 2, prioritize. You've got all this information now. You see all of your assets, how they're connected. You've got that mindset of an attacker. How do we know what to deal with? If everything's a priority, then nothing's a priority. So you need to prioritize. Of course, there's some challenges there as well. There's a huge amount out there. Vulnerabilities are announced continuously. They might not all affect you. How do you prioritize? If you don't understand the context of how things are related, it can be very, very challenging. So how do we think about risk? It's kind of this very simple formula. You've got the likelihood that something will happen by the impact if it does happen. So it seems quite simple, but there's a lot underneath there. How do you look at the likelihood of an attack? You need to think about the vulnerabilities themselves. How severe are they? Are they actually in my environment? Are they exposed on the internet or reachable from the internet? And also, what's actually happening out there in the wild? Are these vulnerabilities actually being actively breached, or is it still very early? Is there a proof of concept out there? There's a lot to keep track of. Are you already mitigating it? All of that feeds into the likelihood. And then the impact is really how it hurts, right? If something did happen there, how does it affect the business? And there's a lot to unpack there as well. If you look at the impact, it's all about understanding that context. There's kind of the technical context. Is it a critical asset? What data is behind there? Is it sensitive data? How's it being used? But then there's also the business context. How would this affect my organization if this breach were to occur? How would it affect my customers, my reputation? All of this needs to be brought in and considered. And this is where we can really leverage advances in artificial intelligence to bring some of that softer, the business context, to play on this prioritization. If we can bring all of this in and understand all of our assets, how they're all connected, all of the risks that are presented, we can kind of arrive at the single number, right? My risk score. And if we update that continuously, then this number becomes a very powerful tool. We can see not just at a point in time, but continuously. How is my risk evolving? Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? This is a very powerful tool. And if we pull all that together, our strategies looking at that risk, bringing in that threat intelligence and applying your attacker mindset, thinking like an attacker, this allows us to prioritize what needs to be done. Fix what matters first, because you can't fix everything. It's impossible. Okay, our third step now. How do we actually take action? How do we mitigate these things? How do we take control of our risk before it controls us? Again, there's challenges, particularly on the mitigation side. Sometimes it can be a lot of work. It can be slow. Attackers move fast. They only need to find one vulnerability and get in there. You need to consider, rank, prioritize them all. We heard earlier from Damien about shifting that mindset. Instead of a lot of manual processes, can we start to really focus on automation, getting these things happening faster? These are our strategies to really focus on mitigation. Prioritizing ruthlessly. Always understand what is the most important thing to fix. And whenever you can, automate it. Automatic playbooks allow you to respond to these common threats and also anticipate, get these vulnerabilities fixed before they become threats. Always automate where you can. And leverage this newest technology. AI can be a very powerful tool for remediation as well. So you're looking at all the most important things that need to be prioritized now. You've got that shorter list, 10 items instead of hundreds. You know what you need to focus on. You're automating all of that baseline stuff. Get that done, get that done. And you're leveraging new technologies like AI to guide your security experts, your grandmasters of security. Help them out, help them prioritize, take care of the stuff that doesn't need their expertise, let them focus where they need it. Proactive security means fixing the exposures before your business is impacted, making your moves before the chess match even begins. If we look at that full cycle, we're getting that real-time view, we're bringing it all together. We're prioritizing to fix what's important first and automating wherever we can. Let your experts, your grandmasters focus where they need to, and let the tools, the automation, take care of the rest. Seeing is important, visibility is very, very important, but action is critical. That's what will stop these vulnerabilities from becoming breaches. Thank you.